And we're recording. Okay, so welcome everyone, as I said before. Here we are in April, moving into spring. So, okay, so for new people, I'm going to go through a few slides and then we'll get right to Patty's presentation. For everyone who is new, these meetings are every third Thursday of the month. Always 2:30 to 3:30. We do usually spend a little time afterwards chatting with people who want to stay on longer. The Zoom link is always the same. It'll be on the email reminders. Again, anyone who's new, be in touch with me so I can put you on the email list for these meetings. So attendees, we're working with groups that are actively working in the Delaware River Watershed Initiative, but we're also working with groups, supporting groups on these EnviroDIY monitoring stations that are just groups that are just working in the Delaware Basin, but are not formally a part of the DRWI. The Stroud Center is able to support this work via the DRWI grants as well as Seesaw. The Delaware River Watershed Initiative is a William Penn Foundation project. You can check out this 4 States One Source website if you'd like to read more about it. And then Seesaw, which is a PA-DEP Growing Greener grant. We can also support the work via that method. So these meetings are simply a time and a space to check in and ask questions, report issues, network, et cetera, et cetera. We provide updates from our standpoint regarding any technical issues that have come up, other workshops coming up, stuff like that. And we're also doing a presentation each meeting that we're taking presentations from local managers and owners, as well as focus topic presentations from folks like John Jackson, who's going to be talking about water temperature next month. So this is our main group of folks that are facilitating these meetings. Shannon Hicks is the main engineer for the Stroud Center. Krista Reeves works with Stroud and the Musconetcong Watershed Association. She helps with the northern sites in the Delaware Basin. Rachel Johnson is a technician on this effort, does a lot of field work and assistance with all these stations. That's me. I'm sort of just facilitating the effort. And then we've got 2 excellent master watershed stewards involved who also serve as mentors, Carol Armstrong and George Seeds. The meeting is being recorded. Please just stay muted unless you have an immediate issue. Feel free to unmute in those cases. All these meetings are being recorded. So you can go to this website. This website has the recordings from all the previous meetings, as well as other workshops. The manual and a lot of other resources are on that site. So please take advantage of that site. This is our general format for the meetings. This is our agenda for today. As I mentioned, Patty Haug is going to be presenting on her work in the Westchester area. And just to review about the Stroud Center's perspective on this EnviroDIY network in the Delaware Basin, our primary goal is to support the station owners, managers, and volunteers in using the stations for their own internal purposes, whether that's research, whether that's education, whether that's outreach. And then our secondary goal is analyzing the basin-wide data set and helping that analysis to help us to build tools that can help station owners and managers to better understand their watersheds and make sense of the data coming off of these stations. So any questions right now before we move on from anyone? No? Good. Okay, so I will stop my share at this point. We have Patty Haug, who's going to be speaking. Patty, if you're ready, you can go ahead and share your screen. Okay. And take it away with your presentation. Patty's going to talk for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll follow up with with some, we'll do a survey, quick survey, and we can follow up with questions.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, go for it, Patty. Looks great.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to jump right in. There are two parts of the presentation I'm giving today. The first part, I'm going to talk about the research that I actually did for my graduate project at Westchester University. And the second part, I'm going to address logistics, because there's quite a lot of communication that went on and actually is still going on, because I am in some way continuing the research that I did. So hopefully you will find it interesting. Okay, so this is the first slide. My project name was Investigating Stream Response to Road De-icing Agents. And the photograph that you're looking at was taken from the parking lot at Greenfield Park on South Franklin Street in the Westchester Borough. The stream you see is Goose Creek. This is one of the 5 streams. Yeah, that's it. That's it on that. So this is a map of the study area showing the 5 watersheds, but only the watershed area above the stream sensors are shown to indicate the area that is included in the impact that the sensors measure. The shape files for the watersheds were exported from Model My Watershed, which some of you may be familiar with. They were taken into ArcGIS Online, and I created the map that you see here. The point markers were made from a CSV file, including the coordinates of the stream sensors. They were also imported to ArcGIS Online. So before we look at the stream responses, let's take a look at the land cover surrounding these streams. If you've used Model My Watershed, you may be familiar with this feature. You can see here that all 5 of the watersheds are primarily developed space. There are 4 categories of developed space. Developed open space is the light pink areas. Developed low intensity is the darker pink. Developed medium intensity is the reddish color, and the cranberry color is the developed high intensity. So if we are looking at Plum Run East Branch in the Gordon Natural Area, that's the orange diamond. You can see the land cover results in the chart to the right. The majority of this Plum Run East Branch portion of the watershed is developed open space, followed by deciduous forest. Now, even though the stream sensor is near the deciduous forest, the stream headwaters is in developed open space. So not only does that impact the stream, but on the west side of the stream in the Gordon Natural Area, right across from the deciduous forest area, there are 3 stormwater pipes that drain directly to the stream from the Westchester University campus and the New Street, which borders South Campus. So this, which many of you are also familiar with, is Installation Day. These photos were taken at the Taylor Run location. And here is the completed installation photo. So there was additional equipment that was used for my graduate project. This is a Marsh McBurney flow meter on the left, used for stream discharge measurements. The black apple that you see in the center on the top, we used as a neutrally buoyant object, and that represents a secondary method for taking just discharge measurements. This was used when stream flow was too powerful to enter the stream. Given the pandemic, I was frequently out in the streams on my own, which certainly isn't an issue until you are wading across a high velocity stream by yourself, trying to balance, holding the wading rod and writing results. Using the flow meter is a much more reasonable, safe, and pleasant experience with a partner. There were a few occasions where I had George Seeds and Carol Armstrong as very competent partners during this activity. Discharge measurements were used to evaluate typical discharge patterns for each stream, essentially identifying when the peak flow of the stream occurs following precipitation. You can certainly use your depth measurements to get an idea about when your stream is at its peak flow, but depth doesn't provide you with the velocity or the area being measured. So the velocity is what often kept me out of the streams with the flow meter and caused me to use apples instead. Based on Carol Armstrong's success with using the NBO measurements, I was encouraged about getting relevant data recorded. So local precipitation I needed to document, and that was measured using the USGS East Branch Brandywine Creek Station, which was the station in closest proximity to the 5 monitoring stations. And here we are at chloride. The photo on the right is of a single grab sample taken during one of the winter events in January 2020. While grab sample analysis is the ultimate way to measure what the water chemistry is, conductivity is correlated with chloride and can be reliably used as a substitute. For reference, a healthy stream in the surrounding Westchester area, not impaired, have a conductivity range approximately between 50 and 250 microsiemens per centimeter. So just keep that in mind as we take a look at the graphs in the next few slides. So the first thing I want to point out, shown in the table on the left, is that the baseline conductivity, which is the conductivity of the streams without salt application, is extremely high. Remember, a healthy stream conductivity in this region is between 50 and 250 microsiemens per centimeter. So Plum Run West Branch has a baseline of 1449. That's highly impaired. Plum Run East Branch has a baseline of 604, impaired, but not to the degree of the West Branch. And Goose Creek is at 1208. These 3, as you might remember from looking at the watershed map, have a high degree of developed area. So this also makes them flashy streams. And the graphs to the right show the precipitation, then the electrical conductivity and discharge of a typical storm where no salt has been applied to the road surfaces. In the top graph, we see the precipitation patterns showing how much precip fell, when precip began, and when precip ended. Here, precip began before 6 a.m. The graph below, precipitation, I designed after Monitor My Watershed time series analysis. This shows the electrical conductivity. You'll see that shortly after the precip, around 6 a.m., the conductivity drops for Plum Run East Branch and Plum Run West Branch. That's because fresh water is entering the stream and the fresh water dilutes any salts that are already present in the stream. So why would salts be present before a winter season? Because salt is also in the soil and the groundwater eventually carries whatever is in the soil back to the streams. Here's the first road salt event of 2019. If you look at the table on the left, you'll notice that there are 7 stream responses, even though we only have 5 streams, because Plum Run East Branch is experiencing 3 salt pulses during this storm. This was assumed to be happening because of stormwater outfalls leading to the stream, which I talked about when we looked at the watershed map. And I talked about there being 3 outfalls across from the deciduous forest area. So looking at the electrical conductivity graph on the right, you can see where the orange line, that is Plum Run East Branch, has 3 peaks or spikes. And if you look at the precipitation, you'll notice that the salt spikes for Plum Run East Branch and Plum Run West Branch start very soon after precipitation begins. So these 2 streams respond first, again, pointing towards sources of salt that drain to the stream quickly. The purple line, which is Goose Creek, responds in 4th place. Taylor Run, the green line, responds in 5th place, and Black Horse Run responds in 7th place. As with the previous slide, peak stream discharge happens after peak conductivity. So on January 12th, this is the 3rd event observed. Looking at Plum Run East Branch in the table or on the graph, we can see that the electrical conductivity spikes to 11,444 microsiemens per centimeter. A lot of you have probably seen things this level or above at your streams, and some of you probably haven't. So unusual things to see. Again, as a reminder, a healthy stream space flow is between 50 and 250 microsiemens per centimeter. Yes, that is a salt spike that we're seeing. It's not a base flow, but there is nothing healthy about a salt spike, no matter how small or large it is. This pattern is really strange because Plum Run West Branch peaks significantly higher than any other streams. So what is this? It's unknown. Certainly a salt pulse, but why is it so different than the other locations? This might have been residual salt close to the storm drain that got washed in all at one time during precipitation. It's really just a guess. Plum Run West Branch had a much smaller response, and the other three streams had very small responses as well when compared to Plum Run East Branch. Event 4 was the most significant of January 2020. Just take a look at the numbers in the table from the column on the right. Our most significant conductivity peak is at 43,287 microsiemens per centimeter for Plum Run West Branch. And how about Plum Run East Branch? This stream experienced 4 salt pulses during this event. The peaks can be seen pretty well in the graph. Goose Creek is missing from this event because the stream sensor was buried and the data wasn't reliable. What I want to point out about the graph to the right, because it is now very obvious, is that Taylor Run, which is the green, and Black Horse Run, which is the blue, respond so much more mildly than the Plum Run East Branch and the Plum Run West Branch. The land cover of their watersheds and their stormwater outfall locations are very different than those of the 3 stream sensor locations in the Westchester Borough. I should also mention that East Bradford Township and West Goshen Township, Westchester Borough, and Westchester University all have their own individual salting practices. This is a graph that shows the correlation of chloride to conductivity that I mentioned at the beginning. During event 4, I was able to grab chloride samples at 4 of the streams. These are the results, along with their conductivity readings at the time of the grab sample, and you can see linear. In conclusion, de-icing agents, as we are familiar with, are already being shown to have significant impacts on aquatic life and potable water. Salts are absorbed into soils, become part of the groundwater system, and eventually make their way into the stream. This is one of the proposed reasons for the high base flow conductivity levels in many streams of the northeastern states where road de-icing agents are used. Long-term impacts are being investigated, researched, and considered. Additionally, alternatives to salt continue to be investigated. If no de-icing agents were applied, specially designed plows and ice removal equipment would be necessary to create safe road conditions. This type of equipment does exist and will hopefully be a future consideration for more locations suffering the impacts of salinization. As an additional follow-up for those of you that may be wondering about the underlying geology, limestone can be a contributor to stream salinization. However, the 5 streams of Westchester have metamorphic schist, serpentine, and gneiss. No limestone is present in the watershed of these streams. So this is the upper part of Taylor Run that we're seeing. So this is the schist area. Then we've got the serpentine, which just a piece of it is, there are a couple pieces in here, right here. There's another one right here and right here in the upper Taylor Run watershed. And then the rest of everything actually falls under the metamorphic gneiss. Okay, so in the second part of this presentation, I'll be talking about the logistics of my project and ongoing research. This continuing research project requires an ongoing investment in communication, engagement, and investigation. So my interest in freshwater systems began as a graduate student at Westchester University. As a geoscience major, I chose the geology track. Having learned that most internships and study programs were slated for undergrads and sometimes even with specific age limitations, I needed to get involved with the environment in a way that would provide me the opportunity to explore and learn outside the classroom. I needed to get my hands in the water, so to speak. So I researched online and came across the Penn State Master Watershed Steward program, went to one of the information meetings and signed up for the class. After a year of being a Master Watershed student, I learned about the EnviroDIY program. and signed up to attend the sensor station training. 2 months later, I was deciding on my Westchester University graduate project and thought there might be something interesting to investigate about the streams. After talking with Dave Bressler, a meeting was scheduled for me, my professor, David, and John Jackson to discuss the details and directions. During the meeting, we looked at locations for stream sensor installation and talked about the reasons why these locations would be ideal. The first order of business was to get permission from the Westchester Borough to install stream sensors. So my professor personally knew the superintendent of the Goose Creek Watershed Treatment Plant and provided me with his contact information. I called him, I emailed him, and he was kind enough to respond, asked questions, and extended permission to install in Goose Creek. The superintendent for Taylor Run location, I met on my own. I went to the Taylor Run wastewater treatment plant, walked inside. Obviously, this was pre-COVID. Explained that I was a student from Westchester University, and I asked if we might have access to the stream by way of their property. And while I was there, I actually learned that Westchester University students go every year to take samples there. I had no idea. And this was great information to have. So it told me that there was already a relationship there between the university and the Taylor Run wastewater treatment plant. So I next needed to scout out locations along Plum Run West Branch, and I could really only do that safely by crossing the yards of residents who lived there. So I knocked on a couple of doors. I had very good luck that people were home. I explained the situation, that I was a student, and I asked if we might have repeated access to the stream walking across their property, and access was permitted. They were perfectly fine and very interested in the fact that we were doing research. And they also said, oh, people cross our lawn all the time. So that just happens to be common in their area, I guess. I then had to ask permission of the stewardship manager of the Gordon Natural Area, which is on the south campus of Westchester University, for permission to install a sensor there. So I composed an email. I heard back from the manager, who was very happy to learn that the project was taking place. Fast forward, the stations have been installed and the winter season is underway. So my professor encouraged me to meet with the manager of ground maintenance to learn about the salting practices on the Westchester campus. So after several back and forths through email, we settled a time to visit. Next, I needed to do the same for the borough of Westchester and East Bradford Township and West Goshen Township. The Westchester Borough website didn't have all of the information I was looking for. So I contacted the administrative assistant who asked me actually to compile a list of questions and then email them over to her. And she said she would answer those questions as she could get answers for them, because she wasn't actually the person who could give me that information. She needed to ask her crew. So that was fine. All in all, it took probably 3 weeks to get the answers to my question, and I consider that pretty quick. So the West Goshen Township had an entire 38-page document about winter operational procedures on their website. So I didn't need to contact them personally, and it's great when you can grab the information yourself. If you have more specific questions, definitely need to contact an individual. And townships they're just busy places. So sometimes you might get a really quick response, and then again, it might take a really long time. But I would say that my experience is that generally people wanted to help. So East Bradford Township had only this document on their website. So I needed to contact the director of public works And based on my question, so I built a questionnaire, the questionnaire I built for the Westchester Borough, I just used the same thing. So I was like, well, if these are the questions that I need answered, I may as well send them right over because I already know what I need to have answered. So I contacted the director. He answered all of my questions as well, and he got back to me in 48 hours. So this was an interesting sort of trip because I went to do maintenance at the Taylor Run wastewater treatment plant one day. And while I was visiting, the superintendent mentioned that their insurance representative had inquired about liability, my being there on their property. So I immediately contacted the Master Watershed Steward Coordinator, and she took care of getting a copy of our Master Watershed Steward liability insurance specifically for this location. So other things, part of my research was going to be having grab samples analyzed. So I was required to research at local labs to see what the costs were and what we were looking at. So we knew what we had to budget for. Were we going to be able to use grant money? Were we going to be able to use scholarship money? So that was another whole conversation and an unexpected research project that added to my already research project, which is typical, and I'm grateful for it. Okay, so when COVID rules had been established, for outdoor spaces, it meant that I could coordinate with Carol and George to go into the field and take discharge measurements. So this required looking at weather, planning locations, checking battery power on our instrumentation, buying bags of apples if we needed them, and just coordinating our days and times. So all that logistically, all that planning. Winter grab samples required much of the same, but with the added responsibility of watching conductivity increases diligently online all throughout the day. So it's interesting because every time a plow goes down the street, it's taking the salt with it, with whatever else is on the street. So you would see conductivity spikes right after plowing in certain areas. George and I exchanged a lot of texts when we did this. We shared where we were going and when for safety purposes, and when we were finished and what time we were actually able to take a grab sample. And then we would go look at the conductivity reading at the time of the grab sample. So there was a lot of communication for this particular type of project. Then right after that, we needed to coordinate grab samples, and they had to be refrigerated. So these grab samples have a refrigeration life of approximately 48 hours. I just learned that they can be frozen as well, and they might have a life up to 36 hours, but for the type of analysis that needed to happen for these grab samples, we needed to get them somewhere within that 48 to 36 hour time period. So we need to organize how to get them all together, because George had some, I had some, then who was going to pick them up or who was going to take them, and how quickly could we get them there. Also, the field data sheets needed to be entered for every single grab sample. And lastly, the organization of transitioning station ship owner. So when I graduated, my goal was to leave the 2 campus stream sensor stations in the capable hands of one of the Westchester University departments. Again, this started as a conversation with Dave, moved to a conversation with my professor, moved outside of my department to the environmental health program via an email from me. Then it was passed around a few times, and it took about 4 weeks before 2 professors picked it up and said, hey, we just got this and we're really interested in learning more about this. This could be great for our students. So that followed up with a Zoom meeting. Then we went through training, And then there was more communication. We had another training. We just had another Zoom meeting. So these will eventually be transitioned, and these stations will be under the care of hopefully their graduate students. But this is another exciting piece of this whole thing, is being able to transition these off and having the university own these stations and really care for these streams. And that is the end. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Patty. That was great. Do you want to
Stop share?
Stop share, I guess. You may have to share again if we want to go back to any slides, but
Sure.
we did have some questions here from folks.
Okay.
Grace Woodard asked, any communicating with municipalities regarding salts and de-icing materials, do they follow the salt issues?
Wait, what do you, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I think what she's getting at is how closely are the municipalities really paying attention to these salt issues in the streams? Or were you able to get an idea about that?
That's a really good question. I think that they are aware that salting is an issue in general. I have not been able to take this particular information or presentation to them yet. That is the ultimate goal. They are aware that salting in the capacity in which it is happening is not a sustainable practice. I do believe that they are aware of that. And it has been taught, they have made adjustments, and adjustments are slow sometimes. I talked most with the Westchester University, the grounds manager, and they, for the past decade, have actually been very careful. They do spot salting. So they will only salt parts or walkways designated. They won't just salt everywhere and over and over and over again. So they're particularly conscious of this issue. The other municipalities, I haven't been able to talk to face to face or really have a conversation. Everything has been through email because of COVID. So I will learn more and hopefully be able to share more later.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe a report later in the year would be a good follow-up to this.
Yeah.
Because I think it really is that issue of how are municipalities responding is a pretty important issue. And then Beth Yount has a similar question. Did you report your findings to local municipalities and the university?
No, I have not done that yet. So we just went through the winter of my research. We didn't take any grab samples because it was a very mild winter. This winter, we had the opportunity to take grab samples. So I want to be able to take back to them more detail than what I was able to focus on. My research ended up being a little bit less robust than we were all hoping for. So now that I understand the streams and the patterns of the streams and where the outfalls are and that part, I think having those grab sample analyses will only support what I'm going to hopefully be able to present and report to them.
Yeah, and that seems to relate to Dave Yake's question of, did you happen to integrate the runoff curves to estimate the total NaCl loading and correlate that to what the township or other agencies record for salt put on the roads?
I wish I could have. That's a great question, Dave. The discharge measurements, I didn't have enough, and I didn't have, there was a lot of difficulty with the data. We had some trouble with the flow meter. It wasn't always registering properly. So I personally am hoping this summer to go back and kind of start over and clean up all that data, because personally I think it's it's a little bit messy. So, so yes, hopefully we'll be able to do that again also in the future, this year sometime.
Yeah, and that's something I'm guessing Yate could probably do some modeling on, but the salt loads is a whole other thing about like how much salt is actually moving in these streams, and that's another really interesting topic. So maybe some follow-up would be good on this at some point later in 2021. Let's see, here's a question from Michael Johnson. Could you talk about which salt management plans monitor salt use, or who appears to have the best practices? Any thoughts, Patty?
I am not familiar with many salt management programs. What I can tell you, and this may answer a couple of other questions as well, is I watched the presentation for Clear Roads. Clear Roads did a, it was about an hour presentation on different parts of, not even just the country, across the world, of people who are dealing with salt issues. They end up in their presentation moving into the usage of equipment so that we can truly clear our roads, not apply to our roads.
Yeah.
What they have found is that equipment really does work. It takes a lot of, there's an upfront cost. It takes a lot of focus and attention and trial and error, but it can work. That's the thing I know most about, but I don't know about, currently don't know about local municipalities that are following a particular salting practice and what their results are.
Yeah,
something else to consider.
Point. It's a great point, Patty. So Michael, so the state of Maryland is really making a lot of progress on salt management. They have quantified salt use, and they've really been able to reduce it via just better monitoring of salt application, as well as—
Lost you, Dave.
You lost me? Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, you're back. Well, I did. Okay. I don't know if you cut out for everyone. We can hear you now.
Okay, my computer is saying internet connection is unstable. So hopefully, Rachel, if you're there and are listening, if I happen to lose everyone, Rachel can take over. But Michael, the state of Maryland, look into them, and then some northern areas like Lake George in New York. There's an organization there that has done a whole lot of salt management, really getting into the quantification of it, and tracking salt application, that type of stuff in relation to the management practices that they're using.
I had forgotten about that. I did see that presentation actually. Yeah, it was good, really good.
So, and I don't think John Jackson's on the call here today, but he would probably be chiming in right now if he did, if he was. Let's see here. We have some more. Oh boy, there's a lot more in here. All right. Where did I end there? Okay. There's Michael's. Rob Tuttle. Patty, could we return to the correlation plot between chloride and conductivity?
Sure. Just a minute.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to, that went by pretty quickly, so I wanted to just take a quick peek at it and make a little screen grab here.
Oh, sure.
So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so it's looking like, Patty, I mean, our general relationship between chloride and conductivity is about a 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 type spread, right?
Yes.
Or is it one? Oh, wait,
Um,
what am I looking at here? No,
well, when you say 1 to 4, 1 to 5.
I get these ratios mixed up, but I'm just looking at, it would probably be helpful to look at that as a non-log transform just to see really where, because it's pretty close there. But anyway, the idea with that, Rob, is simply that it's a pretty good straight correlation. And so once we have that, you can kind of translate conductivity data to chloride levels.
But that would vary stream to stream?
Correct. I mean, certainly the conductivity levels vary stream.
Right. But would the ratio or the
Yeah,
curve?
I mean, it can. I mean, it seems like it's generally, generally get a sort of a, kind of a fairly consistent relationship. But I think it's, if you're really trying to, be good about it, you develop a curve for your stream specifically.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, which stream is this for? What is this a model of?
This is 4 different streams.
Okay.
Oh, so that's all 4 in your region. Okay.
Because the conductivity levels are so high. I didn't think that those were the maximums at those streams.
This is during the biggest salting event of the winter 2020. This was in January 2020. So
This was event 4?
this was event 3, I think. I can go back, I think.
That would be that one.
Here we are. Yeah.
So these values go up to 20. Yeah, there is one at 43,000. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so we're at
Some of those
312.
numbers probably are based upon watersheds that have lower area and sort of are much more flashy. You got
Yes.
low dispersion, high peak flows, and you're going to get higher conductivities as a result of that.
Absolutely.
All right.
I don't know how difficult it would be to do, probably a lot of work, but while, but the EPA does have definitions of what values for how long conductivity can be before it harms aquatic life. And it would be a lot of work, but really interesting to see in streams like this, how often that level is reached during even a month of a winter, or a week of a winter, or I guess more than a week would make sense, but because the definitions have to do with levels that are sustained for a certain period of time. But you have the data where you could do that.
That interests me, certainly. These are, I wonder if that can be used, because these are just flashes, because then 2 days after these streams are at these heights, they'll be back to their baseline. Well, not quite, because there's still residual salt usually on the road for 1 or 2 weeks, and depending on how much precip there is, but that type of peak goes away very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
What you use the term splashy? I meant, what does that mean, Dave?
So that's a good question. I didn't know either when it was first used. Flashy means there's not a lot of spread in your stream. So it's usually a narrow channel, and there's nowhere for the water to go from your surface, but right into the stream right away. And it just moves really fast. So the water all dumps in at one time and it just goes. So there's not a lot of absorption. There's not a lot of ground absorption. The water truly does surface runoff right into the stream. So that makes it, so flashy is quick and fast.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Obviously, Marsh Creek is not a splashy stream.
All right, Patty, could you unshare your screen?
Sure.
Okay. So we are at 3:15. So let's move on with questions here, and we may not be able to get to all questions here today. We've got a lot coming in. Certainly feel free to reach out to Patty and myself if you'd like to follow up with anything that was not mentioned here. So Yake is proposing to you, Patty, that he has some other ideas that he could talk to you about.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I've got some ideas on how you can analyze that data and the runoff curves
Okay,
without having to go back and validate your discharge and all that uncertainty.
oh,
Yeah,
great.
I think, yeah, I think it'll be a lot quicker and probably more accurate.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
maybe you could even come up with some salt loads during those storms, so you can just say this number of tons of salt made it into the stream during this short period of time,
Yeah,
that type of thing.
great.
Beth Yount is pointing out that EPA Region 3 recently did a free 1-hour webinar for municipalities on salt reduction initiatives using case studies in our region. There's been a lot of those around. I saw that, and I believe, Beth, that they did record that. If you have that handy and could put up a link, that would be great. What do you speculate, Grace asks, what do you speculate caused the huge spike of salts in one chart, a municipal dump or discharge? I would speculate, Grace, that is simply road salt on the roads that is just flushing directly from the roads into the stream,
Yeah.
as
When
well as brine applied prior to the storm.
Yeah. And when you're, you may, if you're a person who drives around during salting or after salting, whatever, there are often, I can't tell you how many accidental dumps there are of a salt pile. Like, I don't know whether they're starting up and something gets stuck and all of a sudden all the salt is let out. I mean, there could be that right next to a storm drain. Yeah, who knows?
My question also was concerned about at the edge of Deer Park, my town in here along the Delaware. A municipal, Port Jervis municipal water system is right a stone's throw from the Neversink, and I was just wondering if they get overloaded in a storm event, whether they do dumps, which go through culverts and with their own water systems chloride. I was wondering if that might be something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, Grace. There's certainly combined sewer overflows, and I guess depending on how those systems are set up, I mean, it's hard to say, I guess, what's flushing out of those at certain times. And that kind of takes us maybe to this question from Nathaniel. Can you speak to correlation versus causation? I've been doing EC testing with the practice of saying chloride may influence conductivity, but it may not be the only factor, and that's good. I know that in my area, salt loading plays a very big role, but want to be sure that I allow room for other explanations of a high EC. What impact have you had from other substances besides salts? So Patty talked about the limestone influence. You definitely want to make sure about limestone influence, because naturally streams that lie over top limestone areas will certainly have higher conductivity. So you want to take that into account. Certainly wastewater treatment plants and other dischargers can influence conductivity levels as well, which may or may not be directly and exclusively salt. There's can obviously be other, substances in there. And certainly-
I think there's a difference between whether you're interested in base flow or runoff.
Yeah.
Right? Residual salt, let's say, in base flow.
Right. And base flow, I mean, those streams that Patty was pointing out, some of those base flow levels are certainly plenty high, chloride levels that have chronic impacts. I mean, I believe the chronic level, New Jersey DEP chronic level, Christine, you can speak to this, but what is it, 230 milligrams per liter chloride for chronic?
I think so.
Yeah. So that's excellent, Nathaniel. I mean, certainly you want to, you don't want to just automatically assume. And you want to do things like Patty was doing, taking grab samples, doing additional follow. You can use those chloride strips, you know, just to get a general idea of chloride levels. But those you really just want to make sure that you really follow the protocol really proper, because they're one of those strips. And if you touch them the wrong way or whatever, they can soak up substances that you don't want them to be soaking up.
Could I mention the Pickering data about this issue?
Yeah, sure, Carol.
So Nathaniel, we had about 18 samples in each and 2 reaches of one stream. So 18 about in each, correlations of chlorides from grab samples analyzed at Stroud's lab with the e-conductivity data. And the correlation at one site was an R-square of 0.94. So 94% of that conductivity was being accounted for by the chloride. In the other stream, data wasn't quite as pretty, but it was still about 80% was being accounted for. So that kind of, I thought, I had the same questions you had until I saw that, yeah, there are other things besides chloride raising the conductivity, but an awful lot of it is the chloride.
Yeah, and if
I can share that data with you if you ever want to see it. I'd be glad to share it with you.
If you haven't, it's certainly a good idea to just look for yourself. As Rob Tuttle asked, is this site specific? And certainly it is. I mean, these trends do seem to be similar across sites, but if at all possible, you want to look at your own site. And those strips are, I think you pay $50 for about 50 of them. So they're not terribly expensive and they're fairly reliable. We've checked them against, more proper lab analyses, and they do come out fairly okay.
Good to know.
So let's move on. We've got 8 minutes left. So Carol put in those standards. Those are chronic and toxic standards. Let's see. Michael John, are there histories of IBI indexes, macroinvertebrates of any of these 5 streams? Thank you, Patty.
Oh, I don't know the answer to that.
John Jackson, yes, has done MAIS index scores, MAIS index scores on some of those streams with his entomology crew. Let's see, Krista, the Musconetcong River is karst limestone and runs a baseline of 300 to 400 conductivity.
So that, yeah.
So
that just speaks to, we're not even on limestone, and we're way above that at all the streams. So
yeah, so DEP, Christine put DEP pretty much is saying the same thing as EPA, and I didn't know EPA had set even set an acute level.
Yeah, they did way back in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought they only had that one that was associated that they did for West Virginia streams in association with. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway.
Which is why New Jersey, adopted their standards.
Right.
Can I just ask Patty a question? I think you got to the end of the questions. Patty, since you also studied the methods, the practices being used for salt, if you had the audience with one of the townships or the public works, what would you recommend to them?
I don't know.
Are there some low-hanging fruit or something that you could talk to them about? Something obvious they could do differently? Or does anyone have any ideas on this?
I don't think I have a good enough picture of the whole picture. So, I mean, just because I can see that salt is an issue, doesn't mean I understand the workings of the decisions that are made about how salt is applied. So I think I would have to have some additional conversations and probably read quite a bit more before I could actually suggest something to them. No, I don't. There's nothing obvious to me right at the moment. I think as I study this more, I'll become better at sort of filtering that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a very good point. You have to know exactly what it is they are doing, what their decisions are. There's decision making, yeah.
It's pretty complex, and it sort of gets to Michael Johnson's question earlier about what are people doing to kind of address these issues. And there's certainly like the live edge plows and just really nailing down the amounts and the distribution of you know, the salt during and before and during storms. Someone's here saying about brine. Brining is one obvious way to reduce salt application, has been successful and cost effective in our regions, not
Yes.
suitable for every situation, but a good option. And
Yes.
Westchester is brining.
Yes.
They do brine regularly. So they're certainly making attempts at sort of, you know, updating things accordingly. But I mean, geez, when you just surround a stream and with asphalt and concrete and pipe it, you know, it's gone over the years, it's gone more and more to chemical as opposed to just physical removal. So it's sort of a, you know, it's obviously a worldwide situation at this point with freshwater salinization. So it's an ongoing issue, and all of these attempts that like Patty are making to address this, I think certainly are gaining momentum. And people are making changes. Like I mentioned, the state of Maryland, which really has made a lot of progress seemingly in the last several years. So I think we have 4 minutes left, and I really wanted to get to, I need to do this poll. So if everyone could take 1 minute and do this poll, it would be much appreciated. So I just sent that out. So if you could just take a minute and just real quickly fill out this poll. This is just something we like to keep track of for our own reporting and such.
Dave, I had a question on monitor my watershed and weather data. Any answers to that?
Well, Jim, I mean, you know, Monitor My Watershed can accommodate a lot of different sensors. So if you get a particular precipitation monitoring device, you know, a tipping gauge or whatever, you can work with Sarah Damiano to add that particular instrument to Monitor My Watershed so that you can then program accordingly and get your data up there. It's basically just, you need to have that particular sensor on Monitor My as one of the sensors that is accommodated by Monitor My Watershed.
Well, actually, the Davis weather station is shown there, and I tried uploading the data. It just didn't work, but I'll try it again. But basically, I have to manually upload the, you know, a month's worth of data or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, I have no way of doing it automatically like the water monitor do it.
Yeah, I mean, you mean with a cell signal.
Right, I could just upload the.
Okay. Okay. So you are you are able to upload it at this point.
Right. Well, I tried it and it didn't work, but I'll try it again.
Okay. So there's our results. So it looks like we had pretty good feedback from folks. So thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen quick, and we've got a couple minutes here. So let me just go into presentation mode again. Computer will let me. So we just did the survey. So just a few updates. If anyone is interested in this visual trash monitoring assessment, please contact Mike Hartshorn with Princeton Hydro. This is a really useful effort looking at trash distribution throughout the Schuylkill River from Reading to Philly. And they're just basically gathering baseline information on trash accumulation along the river. So it'll be very helpful if anyone wants to be interested in that. Just contact Mike directly, M. @ Princeton Hydro. Shannon and Rachel are still dealing with cell phone issues. Just please trust that they are doing their best to keep things functioning. They're making progress on building a system that is going to be more reliable for cell signal data transfer. Please check out Manage My Watershed. Carol Carol Armstrong recently did a nice interview with Pete Goodman with Valley Forge Trout Unlimited. That's going to be up there soon. If you'd like to write a story for Manage My Watershed, be in touch. Lastly, I would like if folks could fill out this survey. I sent this survey out to folks, out to everyone via the email chain, but I would like to pass it on in the chat right now. And if folks could just copy this out, copy that link out and complete it on your own time. It shouldn't take more than a couple minutes, 5 at the most, I would say. If you could fill that out, it would be very much appreciated, and it'll really help us with planning out how we're going to be doing workshops in the next year or two. So let me go back into screen share. John Jackson next month with water temperature. We have an opening for June for presentations if anyone is interested. We've got a master's student from Villanova presenting in July, and then Jake Lemon and Matt Barney are going to be from Trout Unlimited are going to be talking in August. So I'm going to get out of here and leave it at that. Anything more there, I think, is superfluous to our immediate needs right now. I want to be respectful of people's times. We are at 3:31, so we can call an official close to the meeting, but we can stay on board for, for any additional questions. So let me check the chat here and see if there's anything else from anyone. Just a lot of thanks here. Thanks, everyone. Any questions, any follow-up questions from anyone? All good? Pausing. Thumbs up from Michael Johnson. All right, well, everyone feel free to invite other folks that you're working with to these meetings. Feel free to be in touch with me, with Rachel, with Shannon, with Carol, with George, with Patty. Feel free to follow up with Patty with any follow-up questions on her presentation. And we will see you next month.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Bye all.
Dave, you can stop recording now.
Thanks, Rachel.